Now that this has happened, and with your work in 3D simulation, what needs to be studied here from this incident in Putra Heights?
You do not know what's going to happen underground.
Right.
You do not want to have these, massive soil movements.
I would stress that after this incident, we need to increase gas pipeline buffers because
Right.
the heat itself is
Right.
too much.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Hazween Hassan. Just last week, on the second day of Hari Raya, we woke up to shocking news: a massive fire breaking out at a Petronas gas pipeline in Putra Heights, Subang Jaya. It was the morning of April 1st. Flames as high as a 10-story building lit up the sky, visible from kilometers away. Footage of the towering flames spread on the internet like wildfire. Temperatures soared to 1,000 degrees Celsius, and it took firefighters almost 8 hours to bring the blaze under control. Residents there described it like a massive earthquake. The explosion left behind a crater about 10 meters deep and 24 meters wide, now considered ground zero. A total of 235 homes were damaged, 87 of them completely destroyed. 365 vehicles were also damaged. And on that day alone, 112 people were injured. 38 are still receiving treatment. 509 families have been evacuated, now housed in temporary shelters, with the Selangor government stepping in to provide cash and other aid, including temporary housing and accommodation at Airbnb units. The cost of damage, well, it's estimated to be at a staggering 65.4 million ringgit, and it's still counting. Now, nearly 2 weeks on, the dust has far from settled. Property experts say home values near the blast site could drop by as much as 20%. For many in Putra Heights, the future looks bleak, and some don't even have a home to return to. So what went wrong, and what lessons can we learn from this? Now, in the studio with me are two experts to help explain. First, I have Innoveem Sindiran Berhad, Managing Director, a 3D engineering simulation expert and consultant engineer in the oil and gas industry, Zamir Rashid. Zamir, welcome to the show.
Hi, Hazween. Thank you so much for having me today. It's my pleasure to come and share my views on this tragedy.
Right. It's great to have you here.
Thank you
I
so
understand that you put forward some very compelling theories as to what could have caused the explosion, right?
Yep, that's correct. I'm an engineer, so when I being presented with all these harrowing images online, it's natural for me to try to look into what actually happened and what sort of things that I can deduce from the things that were shared online. And it's definitely a few interesting things that happened during that day that piqued my interest, and that's why I shared that online.
Right. And we'll definitely go into more detail into all of the work that you've done in just a little while, because I still have my second guest to introduce. Next to Zamir, I have local government and urban planning expert and former Petaling Jaya City Councillor, Derek J. Fernandez. Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hazmin, for having me here, and thank you, our viewers, for being here today to watch this particular show on a matter of great importance as we can see this story beginning to develop more and more every day.
Exactly. Right, so I suppose I'll start with you first, Derek, being the town urban planning expert here. I want to talk about regulations and compliance around housing and planning near gas pipelines, right? In terms of the existing regulations that govern residential developments near gas pipelines, are they being enforced strictly enough? What can you tell us?
Okay, so being a city councillor from Petaling Jaya, by and far the government does enforce its guidelines, its regulations, its laws. However, there are cases where one can discern a lack of enforcement in certain areas. So the norm is, yes, guidelines are enforced. Now, at the moment, as you know, the government is investigating the cause, what happened. Right. So in order to determine whether the regulations had been followed, One, first of all, is determine what is the cause of this event. And number two, the process of approving the necessary actions by the particular stakeholders in this equation. So to make it very simple, in order to determine whether the laws have been enforced, one must determine, first of all, who approved work to be conducted near or inside an area, which we call an ROW, that houses, that carries a gas pipeline, which is deemed to be a hazardous material, actually. It can easily catch fire or is very flammable.
Right.
So from a town planning perspective, there are strict guidelines, there are strict rules, there are strict regulations. Now, in relation to carrying out any activity in the ROW, in fact, if you go to the site itself, you will see yellow signages with strict warnings that no digging, no activity can take place in that ROW. And it also include activity in the vicinity of that ROW will require local authority approval. Right. So the local authority in this particular case, MPSJ, will have to approve the proposed development and whether that development entails replacement of sewage pipes running through the ROW, or whether it allows the utilization of roads going through the ROW, whether it allows digging. That would have to be approved by the Majlis Bandaraya Subang Jaya at a meeting called the OSC meeting. So that approval is called planning approval, and I've yet to see the planning approval in this case. Hopefully the planning approval would be produced to show exactly what was approved and for what purpose. And then there are other laws such as the Uniform Building Bylaws, the Street Drainage and Building Act, Town and Country Planning Act 1976. All these laws make it mandatory that if you are to carry out any digging, construction, building activity, excavation, you need a qualified person to sign off on it and to supervise those works. That is contained in Uniform Building Bylaw number 5 of 1984. It puts the obligation on the consultant who has been appointed to take steps to supervise whatever is taking place to ensure there's no risk or danger to the public. Now that's in addition to the ROW concession holder Petronas also having its own procedures as to what is allowed and not allowed to be done in an ROW and who supervises those works. So those are the laws. So in short, yes, there seems to be adequate laws. The question is, have the laws been enforced in this particular case? Well, we're waiting for the evidence to come out from the investigation to be able to determine that.
Right. And for the benefit of our viewers, I mean, you said a few times ROW, which is short for right of way.
Okay. So a right of way is basically a piece of land, physical land that has been reserved for a particular purpose. In this particular case, it's a utility, gas.
Right.
It can be for electricity, it can be for telecommunications facilities, it can be for water, it can be for sewerage. So that piece of land, the right to put your utility through the land is called a right of way. You have a right to put it through, and depending on who you are, whether you be Petronas or your Tenaga Nasional, that piece of land basically is under your control. And it is done and designed to ensure that there's no disturbance of the soil and the land where that utility is running through, because it is a critical utility, in this particular case, almost a hazardous utility running through residential areas. Right. So that whole strip of land, to use want of a better word, is the ROW. It also acts as a buffer. Right. And there's a certain setbacks that are required, and nothing can be done or should be allowed to be done to disturb that particular ROW. Now, in exceptional circumstances, you may want to put a pedestrian walkway, or you want something to cut across that ROW. That is an exceptional circumstance, and it must be treated with the highest degree of discernment to look at it very carefully, conditions, supervisions, because you fully know that that particular ROW is carrying a utility that is critical and in some cases dangerous if in fact in this particular case carrying gas.
Right.
Can I add a few things with regards to the ROW? From engineering perspective, the ROW acts as a passive fire protection. So that means in the event of, something like what actually happened, there's a separation between the actual fire against the surrounding neighborhood in this case. So that separation has to be a physical separation to avoid any potential, more hazardous or more higher consequences to the surrounding areas, right? And this passive fire protection is what we use in the industry when we design things.
Is this similar to say, because some other experts we spoke to recently suggested that we should consider these gas pipeline areas, designating them as high-risk zones. So should we also assign the same to say, an area like Putra Heights where it's around a gas pipeline area, like we would with airports and seaports? Your take on
I think the issue here is that we have to have the gas pipelines. The gas pipelines are there for a reason. They're transporting gas from the processing plants all the way to the consumers for power generation and things like that. So there has to be a way how to live within this requirement, right? So the development is necessary, housing is necessary, but also gas and also other utilities as well. So these are definitely like Mr. Fernandez mentioned, it's hazardous, right? So we need to have a way how to live with these hazards. So having already specifying that the right of ways would be, an area where no encroachment may happen. That's already treating it as high risk. That's already treating it as high risk. But if you put in like massive labels there, high risk everywhere, it might cause people not want to live there and so on and so forth. The idea here is how can we live in this scenario where gas pipelines are necessary for human life, and at the same time ensuring that everything is safe. And there's also another engineering term where I would like to call ALARP, as low as reasonably practicable. So that means risk has to be tolerated to a certain degree. You have to minimize it as much as possible. So the ROW comes into play to minimize all these potential risks to the surrounding areas.
Okay, Derek, you want to say
so
something?
I mean, the ROW functions as what has been stated as a buffer zone, as well as a zone where there should be no disturbance of that infrastructure. That is to make sure there's no encroachment, and therefore it is critical that the rules surrounding carrying out works in ROW are strictly followed to the T, because if those rules are compromised, they're not followed, they're not enforced, then it can pose a danger, as in this particular case, to public safety in the event an encroachment or an excavation, a activity has caused this particular mishap to happen. Now, if you look at the Tenaga National, you see high tension cables. You notice there's always a big setback. Of say 40 meters or 60 meters. There's a setback. That setback is a buffer. It serves twofold, as correctly pointed out. One is to protect the surrounding areas, and number two, to ensure the protection of that particular utility itself. So it's a dufold purpose of having a ROW.
Okay. Talking about protocols and all these rules that contractors and developers, housing developers have to comply with. We recently spoke to Dr. Gopi Krishna. He's a UTM urban planning lecturer and a consultant in social impact assessment. And he actually called for, he really stressed on the importance of tailoring safety measures based on the type of pipeline, whether high or low pressure, and the density of nearby developments. And he also called for a standardized procedure to address complaints from residents, in the event that they there's complaints of a gas leak. So these complaints have to be addressed within 24 hours. Now, going back to what happened on that fateful April 1st, do you think potentially there were complaints but were not addressed? Or, how do you think?
So we have a mixed bag of statements being made. And this is one of the problems. The finger pointing is going all around, and that does little for public confidence. the poor victims, first of all, have suffered immensely. This is a festive season. Some of them are having their Hari Raya. They, so much anticipation, and and their lives have been shattered. Let alone other people, and everybody living around a gas pipeline now is thinking, "Hey, is it safe? What caused this one? Can it happen again?"
Right.
So it does not help if the longer this matter subsists,
Right.
in terms of confidence to the people who are living along that area. So that, I think, is the first thing that has to be borne in mind in relation to your question. The second point which you have raised, which was, could you just perhaps stated just now, you wanted to know that what is the impact of this?
Right. And also the type of pipeline.
That's right.
These protocols should follow that.
Now, Petronas has a superb set of safety standards for gas pipelines. They are doing this for a living.
You're right.
Okay, and this is serious transportation of energy, and this is a big industry and a big business. So they have a whole lot of guidelines, requirements, and technical specifications. I don't think that's the problem. You also have laws that require buffer zone, ROW. Now, whether the ROW is wide enough today, maybe in light of the high temperatures and the melting down of surrounding areas, you may have to extend it to, say, 300 feet or say 100 meters as opposed to a shorter distance. Maybe that may have to be revisited in light of this incident. There are rules, and the general rule is you do not allow any activity in a gas ROW. That's it. The own signboard outside the ROW says exactly that.
Right.
So the question then is, was activity allowed? And again, you have a mixture of facts. You got one lot saying, "Oh, we never went even near there." The other is showing video saying you're doing in there, and there was a road running. Was the road running across buried gas pipelines as well as old sewage pipes that had to be replaced? These are facts that the investigation would go to. But the thing is, there was that protection already as put in there. Now, the next question is, should residents be entitled to know that they're buying houses where a gas pipe? My answer is 100% yes. The Town and Country Planning Act 1976 makes it mandatory for local authorities to prepare a local plan of the area showing all the development and proposed development in that area. It should mark clearly where the gas pipes are going through, so that a consumer, a person, has a choice whether they want to buy a property in that area or they do not want to. Because after all, as has been stated just now by Zamir, that there's no zero risk. So you make the risk and you take the risk, okay? So the truth must be revealed, and utility mapping plans must be disclosed. Now, that also goes into another issue, that in the event you allowed activity to take place, did you hand over to the contractor exactly where the pipes were buried, where the gas pipeline was, where you wish to put in your new sewage pipes? What is the risk associated with putting it in, and who's supervising it?
Right.
So again, there's not a shortage of the laws. It's a shortage of the strict observance of the laws. Now, if you look again at the Uniform Building Bylaws, Bylaw 5, 1984, it requires the consultant to supervise the works. So was there a consultant on the site supervising activities that were taking place? Who was that person? Was that person understanding that there was a potential of gas pipelines there or soil that could be disturbed or any risk? I do not know the answers to those questions.
And this consultant has to be assigned from both the pipeline operator, the gas pipeline operator, Petronas
the developer in the case of the person carrying out those works. That is, the developer would have their consultant when they submit a planning approval, or they will submit application we call Borang B to start works.
Okay.
Whatever those works are. They can be development works, they can be connection of sewage works. It's part of the same development. That person would sign it. It usually is an architect or a qualified engineer. Then that person then has a responsibility to supervise those works. So the question is, was those works supervised? Now, in this particular case, those works are taking place in an area which could be hazardous. Was Petronas informed of this particular activity? And did Petronas then say, okay, you're going to go near my pipes, we're going to put our people there, or you're going to use our people? Who is the person carrying out the activity? Are they qualified to do though? What are the precautions? What are the risks? How you mitigate against those risks? So those are things which I hope the investigation will be able to answer. so that a better picture, because it's often easy to say, oh, we need new laws. Actually, the question is whether the old procedures and laws have been followed to the T. And that's the issue. And if they're followed to the T, then generally speaking, unless it's an act of God, these kind of problems do not happen. So the question is, has it been followed to the T, and who did not follow it to the T? Because at the moment you're getting mixed signals. Oh, this guy complied, he did everything. If everybody did everything and nobody did anything wrong, nothing's going to just blow up like that, you know.
Right.
So there must be some responsibility in terms of determining those particular matters. But I would stress that after this incident, we need to increase gas pipeline buffers. Because the heat itself is too much. It burns out, so that we may have to increase it something like 300 feet, for instance, or 200 meters or 100 meters at least minimum, or 200 meters. We may have to widen the ROWs for hazardous substances.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you more on complying with the standards, right? Making sure that there's a clear indication of the ROW, and there's no encroachment on it.
Yep.
Because clearly, from what's happened, when there is encroachment, when people do cross the boundaries, it's disastrous, as what we saw, right? So, Zamir, based on what you've hypothesized so far, I think you came up with 7 hypotheses. I think in the write-up that I read recently that you put out. This could have potentially been caused by soil movement, as from reports we know that there was construction work, excavation work going on. So if you say that if this is proven to be true, your hypothesis is proven to be true, what would become of the area? Would it still be safe for people to come back to and stay as residents?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. In terms of design, in terms of how you design these things, so one of the previous questions talks about types of gas pipelines and things like that. They already do that. They already having, in the industry, we call quantitative risk assessments. So you actually quantify what sort of blast loads, what sort of pressure loads, what sort of fire durations and things like that. And so it has been done extensively. I myself have done a few of those as well. So these are never skipped. Okay, it's definitely very, very important. So the risk to the personnel or to the surrounding areas is as low as can be. And like I said, we have to live with these hazard things. But now we're talking about encroachments, and we're talking about the ROW having these, excavation works, construction works being done, and are these actually safe, and so on and so forth, right? For me, the rupture could have been triggered by those excavation, but having to say that the contractors actually went in and hit the pipeline and causing it to fail and things like that probably is a bit, I don't think that's possible, right? Having a massive pipeline like that shows that the impact or what's causing it to fail has to be massive as well. So this is why one of the first hypotheses that I came to conclusion to was that there must be some sort of soil movement down underground that we do not have, we can't view it, we don't have access to it, and things like that. Hence why the RW has to be there, right?
Right.
You do not know what's going to happen underground. You do not want to have these, massive soil movements caused by all these vibrations, external loads that's happening on top. But then again, one of the things that Mr. Derek mentioned was that there's actually a road, going across the RW, right? So I'm pretty sure that when that road was done, the necessary risk assessments was conducted, right? Having these sewage pipes, drainage pipes at the side and things like that, we part and parcel of the road design. So when you look into the actual construction works happening, it is my view that some sort of soil movement happened that caused these, these pipelines to be affected in some way.
Right.
Right. And that is where, all the things that was mentioned, the permits, the approvals, and all those things has to be done. Possibly without understanding what has actually happened
Right.
underground.
Okay, and just to get a clear picture, and for myself even to understand, how much of an impact soil movement does to, say, triggering a leak
Yeah.
or rupturing the gas pipeline. How possible is it? Like, this could have been going on for a long time, for several years. Stress builds up,
Yeah.
and then D-Day comes. That's when the fire erupted.
Yeah.
So how important is it to understand just how how these things can build up?
Maybe I can help you there.
Yeah.
That's how the Highland Tower fell,
Right. Okay.
because of soil movement, because
Okay.
of a diverted water source, and it just collapsed. So I mean that's a classic example of the
Right.
power of
Yeah.
of soil movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So water tables change as well. Underground, the level of water,
Okay.
the amount of water that's there. So this definitely could have happened for a long time. The pipelines were there since the 90s, if I understand correctly, right? That's when they were installed. So there's 30 years is a long time.
Yep.
30 years is definitely a long time, and especially when the road is happening on top. You're going to have dynamic weights coming in, dynamic loads from trucks, from cars, and those will definitely build up as you go along, right? And some soil movements can happen marginally. Every day, some level of movement will occur, and so on and so forth. The point here that I'm trying to make is that the vibrations, the construction, the loads during the construction, there's additional, new building blocks happening at the site as well. So those could have compounded to the potential failure of the pipeline.
So there's absolutely no way that it could have just happened on the day itself, and then suddenly, gas pipeline.
Yeah.
Erupts.
The only way, if you can imagine 36-inch pipelines, solid carbon steel with gas coming through, these are almost as solid as it gets, right? Even if you go and hammer them with your hands, it will withstand those things. It's designed to withstand certain level of loads, right? So to say that someone came in and dug it and impacted it directly, I don't see that actually happening. And in fact, during the fires, of all the pictures coming through, you can actually see the area where it was dug, right? It was a nice clean area, nice clean open cut.
Right.
There was nothing. It was not going down further than you can actually see those in the
Okay.
pictures, right?
All right.
So the accumulation of stresses. You mentioned this perfectly just now. The accumulation of stresses, the compounding movements of soil all along the years, happening beneath a road that's actually crossing the ROW, and the construction workers doing simple changing of the sewage pipes and things like that. That may just be the last straw that broke the camel's back.
Right. And Derek, you as the town planning expert, so we understand now just how crucial it is to appreciate, even the smallest, works, construction going on can over time build up the stress. Do we have proper enforcement, rules in place to monitor this, to make sure that we are keeping track of the stress that is building up around these areas?
So for this, we do not have.
Okay.
These are like old buildings also. Now currently I think they are going to be requiring a re-inspection of old buildings,
Right.
to see whether the structures are there. But they have not passed the relevant laws requiring a mandatory re-evaluation of safety components by the local authority. But having said that, we are dealing here with a national gas supplier, Petronas. I mean, this is a tier 1 top level company.
Yeah.
They know how long the lifespan of the infrastructure is, how long it should be.
Yep.
They will know how to, or should know how to, or would also evaluate the integrity of their pipeline during whatever engineering techniques and methods to do that.
Yep.
Certainly, they have the ability as well as the finance to be able to,
Capacity as well.
and capacity and technical skill to ensure their asset is safe and that its integrity is intact. So that's the first thing to understand. It would be almost an impossible task to get local government to go around and check a Petronas gas pipe. They certainly do not have the skill set or ability to do that.
Okay.
So that's fine. So that's the understanding. The thing here is that has the sequence of requirements been followed to the T? And this is where I come back again to the same issue. As you have, since somebody said, this can be built up over a long time.
Yep.
Okay, assuming that. One would then expect that this risk, as somebody in the oil and gas, the pipe owner would also know about this risk.
Right. Okay.
And then the pipe owner would be discerning in giving permission to anybody carrying out any type of development nearby, within, or in the vicinity of the ROW. Certainly they should send a letter to the local authority to inform them that this is our gas pipeline, and that if it is anything happens to it, there's serious consequences. Please inform us of any piling, any construction activity in or in the vicinity, any digging activity. Please inform us beforehand you approve. And then they should have a stay as a stakeholder. Yes, we can agree. Can we see the consultant? Okay, you understand this is what happens. We need you to do this and do that and all. So that process is very, very important. It seems we overlook this thing because the safety aspect requires people with the capacity and the capability to be able to evaluate the safety of that particular asset or that particular pipeline, and that others who wish to carry out other activities must have knowledge of risk of these hazardous pipelines. So if we go back to the past, let's look at the whole layout of the area. Originally, I believe this was Saim Dabi's master plan development for the development, and they had already put in the normal infrastructure, the sewage pipelines and all that kind of things. They put it in there. Those have not been handed over formally to IWK because IWK requires a handover of sewage infrastructure, and that infrastructure was very good. It was serving all the residents. I do not know whether the pipeline came after or before the road was built and the other aspects were built, but now we have a development of some shop houses and other development, and they needed to, I think the word used was replace, not new sewage pipelines. I don't know. If you look at the signboard, it says Gantian, which means that for some reason the earlier ones could not be used, it had to be done. So at that point in time, they would submit their planning approval to the OSC of MPSJ. The layout plan would show the development, it would show the connection to the sewage facility, and if it runs across that land ROW gas reserve buffer zone, it would be clearly marked on the plan. And then the one-stop center would say, okay, this is it carries gas. Can we get the ulasan from Petronas, the owner? They would be called.
Right.
They would be required to give ulasan. Are you okay with this going through?
Right.
You know, and they would give their comments. Look, we are okay, but we require you to come you need to know where the utilities are, where the danger is, the mapping, and all those things, all those requirements, which they should be because it's the asset. So was that done? So we need to see these documents. And then when you, in fact, gave a approval to enter the site, who was the contractor? Were they qualified to do it? And was there any supervision of the works? Yeah. Even though, as somebody said, it may be accumulated, and this was just the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, but still it is the trigger event, and therefore were these risks appreciated? In the Jaya collapse, if you know, the Jaya supermarket had a collapse, and I was part of that inquiry as the chairman, the actual developer had to actually submit what we call a risk assessment of, look, if I start demolishing the building, and I do it in this way, what are the possible risks? Who are the possible people that could be injured? And what am I mitigating against this? In fact, the actual document itself, the risk was highlighted, but it was not followed on site when the construction was done by the workers. They didn't follow what was supposed to be done, and there were penalties and all that levied. So in all these things, the risk has to be appreciated. And most consultants will be able to know that. If not, Petronas, I'm sure, would have helped if they was requested to go through this whole process. Again, because it's a highly hazardous material. It is fully combustible. It'll explode. It's fumes, So in the slightest ignition source would be able to, it's like a petrol station. That kind of thing with the fumes there. I mean, of course, it's in a pipe, but still, in the event there's a fracture. So I think these are the things that have to be looked at, and I'm waiting to look at the planning approvals that were given. When was the permit to enter What was the date of those permits? They came in on a second day. Did they start work before that? Who was the contractor? What was Petronas input to them as to whether we allowed you to go in, and what were the conditions, and who was the supervising person? I think these are the questions which the public will expect to have an answer. Again, like you said, I believe the property diminution in value is more than 20%. I think 20% is a very small. Nobody wants to live there. I mean, people are thinking, can it happen again next week or next month? And my families. So you have to pity the public.
That's right.
And that's why I think the public interest must be protected, and there must be confidence restored.
Now, in order to have these more stricter enforcement, have regular inspections done, right, there has to be a lot of communication or collaboration between government agencies, utility companies, everyone that's involved in the developing the housing area. So perhaps, Zamir, from your work in 3D simulation and from models that you've studied before, what sort of technologies we can take advantage of and use in assessing risk and mitigating things like this from happening again?
I think the biggest problem that we have is these underground utilities, infrastructure.
Right.
So it's not just gas pipelines, you've got water lines, you've got telecommunication lines, power lines in there as well. I think the biggest problem is that, these are underground, you can't really see them. So it's not properly mapped. Are they being, or do you have drawings of these as what we call as-built drawings? As they are built. Do you have exact drawings showing the coordinates and layouts and things like that? And one of the key technologies that could be done or could be used to map these out would be ground penetrating radar.
Yes.
So ground penetrating radar, like GPR, we call GPR. Basically, you use that to identify what's underground, what you can't actually see them. You can't just go and dig everywhere to verify, because that will become another problem. You might hit them
and costly,
and costly, and you might actually hit. You're trying to identify them, you accidentally hit it, and it breaks and things like that, right? So ground penetrating radar is definitely one of them, and we have other technologies like I'm in 3D simulation, right? So all these spatial analysis, geo-reference data under geo-information systems, identifying the actual coordinates of all these 3D models for these utilities is very important. It's easy to monitor or identify infrastructure that's above ground. It's difficult to really identify what's happening underground, for obvious reasons. So with these ground penetrating radar and geo-reference or geo-information systems, these are technologies that are readily available now.
Yes.
Okay.
It's readily available. People are already using it to a certain extent. And also, it has to be implemented for all the massive pipelines at the very least. Of course, it's not going to be easy to be implemented right away for everything, right? So this is where, at least the major gas pipelines, the major routes for transmissions of power, water, and things like that has to be done. These are, like water, for example. If you have, a water pipe, whether it's sewage or fresh water or whatever it is, underground that actually breaks, then you're going to have sinkholes. That could happen. And there was that.
We had that
Masjid
in
India.
India,
And that's very tragic for someone to suddenly be at the wrong place. It's a classic wrong place, wrong time situation, and to actually fall through that gap, and to find that poor lady. That it wasn't easy, because probably these utility maps are not updated. They are not as built. So these are the sort of things that are very, very critical at the moment. Now you're talking about new developments. You're talking about what additional things that people are because these are standard economic. Activities, right? Growth of new areas and so on and so forth. But if the utility system is not mapped properly, then these are the problems that you're going to have. And there are many technologies available. Augmented reality technology, for example, you can go to the actual sites and use your mobile devices or some AR device, other augmented reality devices to actually see the underground pipelines from the top, from above, right?
Okay.
So these are utilizing, identifying the pipelines using ground penetrating radar, and then specifying or georeferencing these 3D data, and then using augmented reality, for example, to visualize these even when they're underground. And then when you combine all these technologies together, then you'll be more confident on, okay, it's safe to do this here, it's safe to have this activity here, and so on and so forth.
And Zamir, sorry, Derek, you wanted to...
I just wanted to add to that, from the planning and local government perspective, to be able to, apart from these technologies that, in my opinion, should be mandatory, that is, those who provide utilities must provide as-built mapping of their utilities. After all, these are not free utilities. You pay for those services. Yeah. And I think in the case of a gas pipeline, it should be mandatory that the detail as-built. They may have done it. For all we know, they may have already done it.
Right.
I'm pretty sure they have.
Okay, I'm sure they have, because this is a very responsible company. I mean, it's a well-run organization. Yeah. So they will know what to do. They are international in terms of their capabilities. But what is very important is, for new areas, and I had a role in this, to require what is called common utility tunneling. That is to have tunneling for utility wet and dry services, actual tunnels where you can walk in and you can actually look at it. Now, the classic example of this is Putra Jaya. Putra Jaya has a very effective, very good common utility trunking, and I've actually walked in it, where you can see there's no digging of roads anymore in Putra Jaya. You noticed? If you drive around, excellent, well-designed city, and yet we need to impose the requirement of a common utility tunneling, which is surrendered over to the local authority. So whenever you want to put in a pipeline or whatever it is, you use the tunneling. You use the tunneling that is already there, the conduits which you can walk in there. Now, in Petaling Jaya, we did this as a mandatory requirement in the Kuasa Damansara local plan, where the common utility tunneling is a mandatory requirement. When I was there, that was put in originally in the local plan after it had gone through the whole public process. Sadly, today, some people want to lobby to remove it or to cut down its scope, citing cost and all the usual excuses, which will mean that digging will come back, and the whole purpose of having this is to avoid incidences that have happened today, that utilities are buried underground and you don't know what's going on. You can't inspect it. You either put it above the ground or you put it under the ground. Above the ground also has its problems. Yeah. We've seen planes fall out of the air and hit things and all over the place. So, so we have, but common utility trunking is something very logical. Tunneling, that is to have just as you have conduits running in your house for your electrical wiring, you don't hack the wall as you like. You need to thread wire, there's a conduit already there. So I think this should be mandatory, and I think the government should not listen to all these people. I think KL now is going to go, because of what happened in Masjid India, to understand the concept of we need to have dedicated tunneling to provide these services, and it can be a monetized model. That is, the local authority can actually charge a fee if you use the tunneling, and it can be financed, and there's ways around it.
Yeah. Right. So having direct access to these utilities that are underground is very important, and which is why you're pushing for.
Well, we have already passed it in the local plan and that is under the law, but there's lobbying going on by people. Oh, too expensive, I can save money, why don't we put half here, half there? And it always gets to this situation. The thing is, this is very important, because had we had gas piping through common utility tunneling, then this problem which Zamri says of, I don't know what's going on underground, or we are not sure whether there's some deterioration, is much more easy to solve, because you'll just walk in the tunnel. I've actually walked in the Putra Jaya one. Amazing job managed there. And you can actually see all the utilities running. You can actually physically, if you want to inspect them, if you want with a torchlight.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Zamir, in your analysis, you had a collection of hypotheses, and at the end, you concluded it with saying that the incident was nothing short of a miracle, that no lives were lost, apart, of course, from the millions in property damage and emotional toll on residents. So now that this has happened, and with your work in 3D simulation, what needs to be studied here from this incident in Putra Heights?
from my personal experience, I've been involved in accident investigations before. Normally, you would want to identify what happened before the incident. So what actually is the root cause and so on and so forth. You also want to identify how to move forward. Right. So okay, things has done. It has happened. So now what? So this is where a number of improvements has to be implemented. First of all, for town planning, is it safe to be beside ROWs? Do we need to increase the ROW sizes later on in the future? What about the existing ones and so on? But you also need to ensure that the gas pipelines are managed better. Petronas has a strict safety requirements. It is unfathomable for them not to follow these strict safety regulations. Right. Like Derek probably mentioned, they're a multinational company. So it just makes sense for them to follow all these safety requirements to the T. But these things still happen, right? So moving forward, you need better technology for designing of the gas pipelines, maybe thicker, or maybe make change the design in some way, one way or another. You need better monitoring using digital technologies. I mentioned about designing these things using ground penetrating radar and so on and so forth just now, but you need to have real time data on pressure monitoring, on leak detection systems. Right. We have remote sensing using satellites, looking at all these possible scenarios. One of the Bernama reports talked about the shutdown taking 45 minutes, or they started the shutdown procedures about 45 minutes after the incident. So how can we improve these things? And in industry, it's always been like this. You learn from all these tragedies. Like Highland Towers happened, you learn from that. Right. You see all these aeroplane accidents happening, you learn from that. And when you learn from these scenarios, you will improve the regulations, you will improve the safety requirements, you will improve the risk as well to everyone. And in this current digital age, there's a lot of digital technologies coming through that allows you to have all these real-time, remote, even remote data capture, a remote controlling of valves to close these things. And this is where we have to learn how to improve the design of these and operations of these. And then you look into the houses. One of the things that I observed, the trees and plants right beside the ROW, due to the fire, they were incinerated. Right. Okay. And these wooden structures, they are, highly flammable compared to, proper structures. And maybe, if we have bigger ROWs in the future, you also specify that no trees are planted in this area. Possible.
Right.
Those things that we have to learn from incidents, looking at how we improve collectively as a community. We can't just blame everyone as well. You have to. I mean, it's easy and it's fun to point fingers, exactly. And especially when you're an outsider like us. We're just seeing from outside, right? We are a community member, and this tragedy is triggering as well. So you would want to know. Naturally, you would want to know. You actually want to be involved. So. Let's not blame, point fingers. Let's learn collectively on how to improve these things as well. And that's how I view things.
You also mentioned in your write-up that you haven't actually been to ground zero yet, right? But you've made your analysis based on what you can find online from the videos, the pictures that went circulated online. Do you think there's enough now to suggest, a very possible, likely cause for this? Do you think that the authorities need to dig much deeper, much further, in order to come to a conclusive, finding and say this is what caused the fire? A, B, and C led to this.
I don't think it's enough. We see after the fact. We see the impact. We don't see what actually caused it. We can't see the failure mechanism of the actual pipeline. We can't see the the corrosion levels. Were there metal thinning there? We can't actually see whether the soil moved. Were there any significant subsidence happening underground? We don't have all those things, but we do have the thermal impact, the tires being melted even a few hundred meters away, damaged housing due to the debris. And all those things we can actually observe, and the things that are readily observable, we can immediately conclude that's straight away. That's immediately something that's possible. But having the root cause, firming it, and validating the theories that people have, including mine, validating those with actual, evidence. Because that evidence is necessary to ensure that whatever that we learn from this is to avoid that from happening again.
Right.
Yep. And normally, based on my experience, pipeline sections will be brought to the lab. They will actually look into any deformation, any corrosion happening, and identify, the failure mechanism and so on. So those definitely will be done. I trust in Petronas. They have. I'm a consultant for them, and I work with them. I know that they will do all these things. Even if they don't have regulations, they will still do it, right?
Yeah.
It is something that we still have to do a lot more careful investigations before we confirm that yes,
conclusively this
is what happened, and so on, and how can we learn from this, how do we avoid this from happening again, etc. The biggest issue here is that, look, we have public citizens, or the public, the normal people outside. We have to, you can't let anything similar to this happen again, ever.
Right.
We have to ensure that it never happens again.
So, in fact, that's what I wanted to add. In the meantime, pending the full facts surfacing, the cause of failure, and whose responsibility this matter lies with, or one person or more than one people, we need to protect public safety and public confidence. It cannot be compromised. This is the principal duty of local government, to protect its people. So I would, first of all, look, number one, at whether we need to make it a mandatory increase in buffer zone, which means all future development will not be allowed because we've realized that maybe the buffer zone may not be adequate for this level of mishap.
Yeah.
I suppose if it were extended 100 meters each side, the impact would have been far less in terms of the damage that had been caused. So that's the first thing. The second thing will be a total prohibition against any activities in an gas ROW buffer zone until the report comes out. We do not allow such activity. In the event activities allowed, there must be a report submitted by the owner, in this case Petronas, of the risk and the supervision that is going to be done, and outlying the mitigating measures, both on the part of the developer, must submit their technical report, as well as the gas owner, and to absorb all liability. And if that is not done, then the local authority cannot give the planning approval. So we just stop. We hold everything until this risk assessment reports are bid together. Now, it's one thing to write a report. It's another to stand by that report, that if something happens, I'm going to assume liability. So I think these are the things that local government can start to evolve to begin to ensure that those who have the capability, capacity, and knowledge to be able to protect the asset or to protect public safety, they have to invest the resources to do it, failing which the projects will not be approved. I think this is fairly important. And that will be an interim, immediate measure that can be implemented by an announcement, pending the detailed study as to whether we require a full re-evaluation of pipeline integrity to be handed in by a certain period. If the results show that it was a material failure, or it's been it's been compromised, it's aged or whatever, I do not know. We don't know the answer to this.
I would like to also add that the whole world is looking at the results of this investigation, because pipelines are installed everywhere in the world, right? And they have followed certain standards that may be outdated as well. So the findings and the failure mechanisms, the root cause analysis, the thermal impact, all these things will be, implemented worldwide. And this is why, it has to be transparently investigated. You have to, you can't have any, fear of being blamed. You just want the truth. You just want the truth, right? Everyone, from the contractors, from the local governments, from Petronas' point of view as well. Everyone just has to be transparent and forget about the potential. I don't want to be blamed and things like that. But we just need the truth. And from there, we have better regulations. We have better safety for public. Avoid any losses to industry, to Petronas as well, to the operators of the gas pipelines and things like that. So everyone will benefit from a proper, transparent assessment analysis of these things. And if it could be made public, that would be great as well, because everyone needs to learn from this, right? And even the whole world. I was mentioning, the whole world will look at this, and they will also use the findings from these investigations in setting up their pipelines as well.
Right. So this has to be the ultimate lesson.
Yes.
For all of us.
For all of us,
to
yes.
learn from.
Correct.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, again, for making time for us today. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Again, I would like to thank personally Derek, our
welcome.
urban planning expert. Thank you so much for coming. And Zamir, thank you. Thank you for your wonderful insights into, unfortunately, a tragedy that has to be addressed. Right. And for those of you watching, if you enjoyed this episode, do hit that like button on our YouTube channel, the channel that you're watching this episode on right now at NSD Online. And don't forget to subscribe as well. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our handle is at NSD Online for more news and updates, not just for the show, but for all other news reports that we deliver to you daily. Well, thanks so much for watching. That's all the time we have for today. I'm Hazween Hassan, and until the next one, it's goodbye.